I don't know how many of you people are active backpackers, how many of you are just interested in backpacking, or just had a free half hour for lunch. But we're going to talk today about kind of the reality versus the myth of backpacking. And I take that approach because I started this GetHiking program in 2013. And one of the things that I would do on hikes is just ask people if they backpacked. And I would often get a look of like I was crazy. Why would anybody do that? And then in talking with them, I realized they had a lot of misconceptions about what backpacking was about. So that was a lot of the reason why I started doing an intro to backpacking class a year later. So one of the things that we do in this class is try to dispel some of the notions and give people a more realistic sense of what backpacking is truly like. So that's what we're going to look at today. Is we're going to look at 5 popular myths about backpacking, and along the way, feel free to ask any questions. I've got the chat open too, and if you're more comfortable doing that, feel free. So the biggest misconception was that you have to carry a lot of weight. And back in the day, that was certainly true. Colin Fletcher is considered the father of modern backpacking. He wrote a book called The Complete Walker, which first came out in the late 60s. And he was high tech at the time. And his packs typically were between 50 and 60 pounds, which was about as light as you could get at the time. So yeah, packs were really heavy at the time. And that's one of the things that has changed radically. So a lot of the reason that's changed is because the materials for gear have changed so much. If you take a look at this tent that's being set up, that tent, it's a Dyneema. It's made of a fabric called Dyneema. Most tents right now are made of ripstop nylon. This one is, it's an expensive fabric that's called Dyneema. That tent, I think, weighs 17 ounces, as opposed to a tent from, typical nylon tent right now. Generally, a 2-person tents weighs between 3 and 5 pounds. So you save a significant amount of weight. The other thing you save is this thing packs up to almost nothing, so it doesn't take up much space in the pack. The one downside to this lightweight equipment, and the rule for backpacking today in general, is the more you pay, the less you get. So you're paying for a lack of weight. That is the main thing that you're paying for. But these materials tend to be pretty sturdy, and some of them aren't that expensive. So you can buy like some of the cook gear, some of the mainly the cook gear, but a lot of it, like with the tents, the poles and that type of thing, are made of aluminum. It's a high strength aluminum, which is sturdy, but it's not that expensive. If you want to go real lightweight, you go to titanium, and that's where you start to get into some money. But aluminum, pretty lightweight and not that expensive. So we talked about Colin Fletcher having a pack that weighed 50 to 60 pounds. Ultralight backpackers, ultralight by definition is 10 pounds or less. That is a base weight. That does not include food or water, which to me is kind of a misleading, because you're not going to go out without food and water. It's kind of a crucial element. Water, if you're on a trail that has good water sources along the way, you can minimize the amount of water you have to carry with you. And food, if you're going dehydrated, then your weight is going to be somewhat minimal. But ultralight backpackers, generally in the 7 to 10 pound range. There's another category that's 5 pounds or less. You don't run into too many people like that, but it's still an option. So if you think about the day pack, if you're a hiker, that is, your day pack probably on a winter hike at least would weigh somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 pounds, maybe a little bit more. But you can get that weight down quite a bit. And I would say for the people in the class that we do, the weight that we shoot for is 30 pounds or less. And that's generally pretty achievable. And that's achievable mainly through a sleeping bag that doesn't weigh that much. Thing with sleeping bags is if you're out in colder weather and you need a bag that's rated to a colder temperature, it's going to weigh a little bit more. A lot of people, though, these days are using quilts. A lot of, especially the lightweight, ultralight hikers, those weigh even less because there's less material. So it's pretty easy to get that weight down under 30 pounds. The tents, same thing, 3 to 4 pounds for a 2-person ripstop nylon tent. And the cost on those, you can get a good tent in that category for around $200. So the weight issue, you're looking at about half the weight that you would have back in when backpacking was first getting started back in the 1960s. Another myth is that you can't eat well on the trail. In fact, pork and beans being the staple, and that was, it used to be true to a degree. Canned food was convenient. You could actually just open the can and put the can in the coals and cook it that way. You still have the waste though of the can. You got to pack that out. It's a little bit heavy. I think a can of beans weighs just under a pound. So there's a fair amount of weight involved with that. And you tended to be kind of stuck with that kind of meal. A little more advanced backpackers got a little bit more aggressive and creative. Eggs and bacon was kind of popular for breakfast, but if you were cooking that in a cast iron pot or pan, the problem with that is, one, the cast iron weighs a lot. The other thing is you can never get those completely clean. And as long as you've got a little bit of residue that's staying in that in that pan, then you have an issue with bears and attracting critters. So a little bit of an issue there. So today, the main way that people eat, a lot of people like dehydrated meals. You can do your own dehydrated meals, but a lot of people will buy, like the picture, the woman that's eating out of this bag, she is eating biscuits and gravy. There are all kinds of meals that come in these bags. And all you do with these, you open it up, you boil water on your stove, you pour the water in, you let it sit for anywhere from usually, I don't know, some of them are 8 minutes. There's one that's up to 20 minutes, and they advise you to, before you set up camp, to get your meal going, because it does take quite a while for those meals to cook. In general, they're pretty tasty. They're a little expensive. They're anywhere from usually from about $9 to $13, but the convenience is real nice. The expense, especially if you're just going out for the weekend, if you're having 2 dinners, it's not too bad. And, you know, again, there's very little cleanup. You can also go the cheap route pretty easily and pretty tastily. They make, they're these Knorr's rice meals that are considered a side for most purposes. Like if you were doing it at home, but they make for a great meal on the trail. And you can put in some chicken, like a chicken packet. And for $2, you can have a pretty good and filling dinner. One thing that stayed relatively constant over the years is Pop-Tarts for breakfast. They have made some advances with Pop-Tarts. It might surprise you. Pop-Tarts in their original form tended to break up pretty easily. And so that was a little bit of a hassle. But they now make Pop-Tart bites, which are just little small, and they're more sturdy, and they're perfect for backpacking. The nutritional value is almost nil. And you really do need to take into account nutrition when you're backpacking, because obviously if you're hiking 7, 10, 12 miles with a pack on your back, you're going to be burning some calories. But a little indulgence now and then, not such a bad thing. Another concern that people had is that you're constantly uncomfortable, that you're sleeping on the hard, cold ground, that if you are sitting down, then you need to find a log to sit on, or you're actually sitting on the ground. It was assumed that if it rained, you automatically got wet. that if it's cold out, then you're cold by definition, and the list goes on. Here's a quick look at the reality today. So this tent, this fellow actually took the intro to backpacking class. He got into camp at about 3 in the afternoon, and he was in that chair for probably the rest of the day. That chair is kind of a modern innovation. It weighs about a pound, and they cost about $100, but it is one of the indulgences that even some of the ultralight hikers are using. And it does make such a difference. One of the great things about backpacking is just hanging out at camp. And if you can hang out at camp comfortably, as he's doing, then all the better. His little house here, his little tent house made of nylon, inside of it, he's got a 3-inch thick sleeping pad. Sleeping pad is vital for a couple reasons. If it's winter, you'll want a pad that's going to insulate you from the cold ground. And the pads come in with R ratings. So the higher the R rating, the more insulation value it's got. But the 3-inch cushion is kind of remarkable because it's almost like sleeping on a mattress at home. Some of these sleeping pads are a little more sophisticated and a little better at it than others. And you can spend, $100 on one of these, but they're well worth it. He's also got a 20-degree sleeping bag in there, which, the temperature, that 20-degree rating, just if you're not familiar with this type of thing, there's a little bit of screwiness with the rating systems for these sleeping bags. That 20 degrees, that almost always means that's a survival level. It's not a comfort level. So it's saying that if it gets down to 20 degrees, you can survive the night. You might not be real comfortable, but you can get through and probably survive the night. Some of the bags now have different ratings. They'll have they have the survival rating, and they'll have a comfort rating. Now, granted, this is going to vary depending on how you sleep, whether you're a warm sleeper, a cold sleeper. So it's a little bit relative, but in general, that's something to keep in mind. And they generally keep you extremely cozy. A tent, if you get a modern nylon tent, at least when it's new, it'll keep you dry. They come with rain flies for the most part. The ventilation is pretty good. Even if you get a pretty good rainstorm, you're not going to get wet. You do need to treat them after a while. If you get out a lot, it's a good idea to treat them once a year, just to make sure that they're going to retain their waterproofness. And this is a big one for a lot of people, that you can't get a good cup of coffee on the trail. So back in the day, and this again is not all that long ago, but generally you'd have to make a fire. It takes a little while for the coals to heat up. It takes even longer, well, not even longer, but it takes additional time to get the coffee perking if you've got a traditional percolator. In the end, you've got these grounds to deal with, which are a bit of a mess. And coffee, these percolators, you're pretty much limited to straight up coffee. And for a lot of people today, that's a bit of an issue. I myself love black coffee. Camp coffee to me is the best, but there's a perception that you can't get a kind of a modern cup of coffee on the trail. However, so the reality of coffee, these two stoves that are shown here, the one on the right is the jet boil, and that was kind of a new concept. It boils water in about a minute. That depends on altitude and the temperature, but in general, you can boil water. You can boil you can boil a liter of water in about a minute. If you're using instant coffee, then it takes about 1 minute and 5 seconds to have a cup of coffee. This other, whoops, sorry, go back there. This MSR stove works on the same principle as the jet boil. It has a French press device. So you take 1 minute to boil the water, and then you add in the coffee grounds, and you press it, and you've got coffee in about, I don't know, maybe less than 3 minutes. So pretty tasty. And as far as not being able to get a mocha latte with lavender on the trail, they do make flavor packets that you can add to coffee. They also make a complete packet that's got all of that in it, including the coffee. And frankly, they're not too bad. So yes, you can get a good cup of coffee on the trail. So another myth, you get all smelly and dirty backpacking. Well, that's true. You do get smelly and dirty. And that's a problem for some people, for a lot of people, actually. But there are things that you can do on the trail to try to mitigate that. People take wet wipes. Wet wipes can do a lot of good, especially right before you go to sleep, because if you crawl into your sleeping bag and you've been sweating and hiking all day, then it's a little bit hard to get a good night's sleep. But wet wipes, hand sanitizer can go a long way toward kind of minimizing the smelly aspect of backpacking. In the summer, so they make a solar shower, which is basically just a plastic bag with a tube. You can fill the bag up when you get to camp. You keep it in the sun. It takes about 2 hours for it to heat up to a point where it's relatively comfortable. And you can hang it from a tree and then take a shower with it. You can also go in a stream and kind of wash up a little bit. And of course, the key thing, especially in warm weather hiking, is to take plenty of clean socks and underwear, because that can keep you refreshed more than you might realize. So we're going to take a second here and look specifically at water filters, which is another key element of modern backpacking. We're going to take 3 minutes, and Austin here from Great Outdoor Provision Company is going to tell us about 3 different kinds of water filters.
Howdy friends, Austin here at Great Outdoor Provision Raleigh again to bring you a gear talk video with Trusty. Today we're going to talk about water filters. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Sawyer brand of water filters, probably the most common that you run into with other people on the trail that they have. We were going to talk about a few different options that we carry at Great Outdoor along with the Sawyer, just to give some folks a good idea of what else is out there besides the Sawyer. So the first one we're going to go with is by a company called GetHiking. It's the Hiker Pro Micro Filter. So this is just a simple filter of, you have the filter that's in there, you have the hoses that come with it. It connects to the bottom down here. And what you're going to do is just pump this to bring that water in. It's going to all carry in a case, which you can keep in your pack. It has all the accessory parts in there. Packs down really nice, and is a really good for a single person, even a small group of people that are there. So this one is running at $84.95. Another good option we've got is the rail. Really easy to use here. So what you're going to do is, you like to loosen this top, pop it off, let some air flow in there. You're just going to pull down, scoop your water into here, and then it goes through this filter system at the bottom. You want to be filtered out, you want sediment, bacteria, protozoa, viruses to get filtered out of that water. So you can take the prettiest water, scoop it up in here. Having this open allows the pressure to escape, and you just push all the way up and are able to drink out of that top filter. So this is going for $89.95. Really good option for a solo person, a long day hike, a fly fisherman accessing hard to reach waters in the backcountry to have that water. Good group filter system is going to be the Platypus. It's a 4-liter gravity system. We have a really simple dirty clean bag. Dirty hangs higher in the tree than clean. You set it up, filters through, and you just wait. It'll be set. This one's running at $109.95. And then as good backups, we have the SteriPen, which is a UV light, and then some iodine tablets. It's always a good idea to keep one of these in the back to kill those chemicals. So come see us here at the shop.
Okay, I'll add two quick things to that. You mentioned the Sawyer at the beginning. The Sawyer is probably the most popular filter. He didn't mention it because they're in short supply right now. They're part of the supply chain issue. But basically, it's a very simple water filter. You fill dirty water into a bag, you attach the filter, and then you get it into your water bottle. And these water filters are great because one of the biggest differences between backpacking today and backpacking about 30 years ago was the treatment. Back then you used iodine tablets. And I mentioned that people drank Tang on the trail back then. And the reason they drank Tang was to cover the taste of the iodine tablets. So these filters will get out most of the issues that you find in the mountains. And, it's something that you shouldn't go into the mountains without. So if you are interested in backpacking, like I said, we do have an intro to backpacking class that we started in 2014. And the thing about this class is there are a lot of first-time backpacking opportunities where you pretty much just show up, say on a Friday afternoon, you're given equipment and food, and then you hike 5 miles, set up camp. You're doing it all in real time, all without any preparation. The class that we do starts with about an hour-long online session that goes over all the gear in more depth. And we talk about the range of gear that's available and the cost involved. Now, for the class, we also have quite a bit of loaner gear, especially in the areas of backpacks and tents. So the loaner gear is available for free. So you don't have to make a huge investment. And the other nice thing is when you're first getting started, it's nice to see what else is out there, what people are using, what some of the options are before you make that kind of a commitment. We go on, and then we have a 5-hour in-field training session in which we simulate a weekend backpack trip. So we show up in full pack. We go over how to pack a pack, and everybody, we demonstrate how it's properly done. And basically that is so you get the weight distribution right. If you get a good weight distribution, it's going to be a lot easier to carry that weight on the trail. So we go over that, and then we usually hike for about 2 miles in full pack. We find a place to camp. We go through setting up camp, identifying a good campsite. We go through and we will cook. We'll cook a lunch. So we go over cooking and the different food options, and then we break camp and we hike back. And then we end up with a 3-day, 2-night graduation weekend where you basically we just show up and we'll do a weekend trip. So it's basically you're employing everything that you've learned so far. You should be in a position where you don't need a lot of guidance, but where our instructors are there, and there's learning in the field. There's also things that we'll go over that we don't go over in the class, which are a little less practical in training. How to hang food to keep it from critters, water filtering, and basically just one of the big things is adjusting the pack while you're hiking to keep it from being more of a burden than it needs to be. So we have 2 spring classes coming up. We have one in North Carolina. The dates for that, the gear session is February 23rd, and then we do the training session at Morrow Mountain State Park. And our graduation weekend is at South Mountain State Park. We also have an intro to backpacking class coming up in Virginia, and that one will be in March with the graduation. Well, the training trip will be at the Mount Pleasant National Scenic Area. That's for those of you who live in the Charlotte area. We'll also do one at Merchants Mill Pond State Park. The graduation weekend will be on the Appalachian Trail in Central Virginia. And if you're interested in the class and you register by Sunday and you enter lunch at the checkout, you'll save 10%. We also do a number of trips. We are doing trips we'll do several trips this year on the AT. We do a trip to Mount Rogers in March. We're doing the Virginia Triple Crown in May. We did that for the first time last year, and that was an incredibly popular trip, very challenging, but as far as views go, I don't think there's a trip in the Southeast that's got better views. And then we're also doing a couple of long trails later in the year. So that is our discussion of backpacking. Do you have any questions?
This is Lori. I have a question. I didn't see the price for the course.
Oh, the price. Yeah, the price for the course is $295.
Okay.
And that includes everything we talked about. And if you need any loaner gear. Loaner gear is available on kind of a first requested, first awarded basis. We have quite a few backpacks, so we're able to get, we do a pretty good job of being able to fit you with the pack that's right for you. Getting the right pack fit is a huge thing, because if you have a pack that's not fit for your size, you're going to have a long day on the trail. So we try to get you dialed in, makes a big difference.
Okay, I have one more follow-up question, which is, what's the age for the course? I mean, is this just adults? Like, I have a 14-year-old daughter, so I was just curious, like, what's the age range?
We generally, it's about 13, but as you know, kids range so much. I mean, I think the youngest, we had a 10-year-old once who was, who did much better than his father did. And so as long as, I think if it's up to age 18, I would say generally 12 to 18, as long as they're with an adult. And then we've, I think the oldest backpacker we've had was 78. So yes, there's a question about having gear, but not necessarily knowing how to use it. That could be something that we could set up a time to go over it, just an individual session. It is interesting to see what the kind of gear that people have. Some of them inherited gear from a family member. Some have got gear that they think that's worked well for car camping, but doesn't necessarily translate to backpacking. So probably the best way to handle that would be, we would just set up a one-on-one session. You could show me the gear that you've got, and we'd discuss whether that's going to work or not. There's a lot of entry-level gear that is fine for just getting started. It might be something that you'd want to upgrade at some point. One of the things about getting out on and taking trips with other people is you get exposed to so many different kinds of gear. And there's a lot of gear envy that will pop up. So just be advised that you make that initial investment into your backpacking gear. That might be the only investment you need to make. But I will tell you that you're going to get out, you're going to see other people, you're going to see things that you want.
Joe, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Since we're on the subject of loaner gear, you loaned me some gear probably a year ago, and I need to get it back to you. So,
oh, yes. You're in the Charlotte area?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you know if you're very close to the Great Outdoor Provision Store?
Yes, I am.
You know what? If you could drop it off there, they will send it to me.
Oh, fabulous.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll let them know to expect you.
Okay.
Yes. So
Fabulous. I will take it to GOP. I will label it with your name and talk to the people about what happened and what needs to happen.
Oh, well, good. Well, I appreciate the fact you're keeping better track of it than than I was. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing that.
Okay, no problem.
Yes. And I see there was a question about the 10% code, and I see that it was answered. Thank you, Eric. Lunch is the code. So
I do have a question about the jet boil stoves.
Yes.
What kind of fuel do they use?
That stove uses a canister stove. It's a mix of 3 gases. It's the most convenient and the easiest to find type of gas. So it's compressed. It's compressed in a canister, and then you just screw the stove onto the top of it. The canisters come in different sizes. The smallest one, which is usually about $4, that will pretty easily get you through a weekend. Depending on how conservative you are and cautious you are with food preparation, it could get you a lot longer than that. But yeah, it's very convenient. There's no chance of leaking. There are alcohol stoves, which are lighter and less expensive. They're a little more cumbersome to use. That's usually the kind of thing that you may be exposed to if you go out on a trip and there's somebody using one, that you'll get a better idea of whether that's something that you might be interested in using.
Thank you.
And the jet boil, one slight limitation to the basic jet boil is that's basically good for boiling water. They discourage you from actually cooking in it. So like if you were going to have chicken and rice and you boiled a cup of water and then you put the rice in it, they're a little bit harder to get clean. I've done it. I haven't had any problems. I think they're just being cautious about it, but they do tend to be a little bit more limited. The jet boil stove itself, though, they do offer some alternative pots that operate with that stove, so you could look into that. Anything else? And if you have a question that comes up, feel free to email me.
So I do have another question on the course.
Oh, okay.
If I go to the getgoingnorthcarolina.com, does that have the link to sign up? And is there a deadline for the North Carolina one? Like what's the time frame for signing up for that?
So the North Carolina, the first session is February 23rd.
Okay.
So you'd want to sign up before then. If you go to getgoingnc.com and click on the top, it says explore with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then you go to classes, it'll be under there.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.